I will welcome everybody to our third module of our removable series from Zahn Technique. I'm super happy to have you here. Super happy to have Veronica here. She's still here with me the third time, so I'm not that annoying, obviously. Anyway, so I'm pretty happy. Also, Wednesday night again, so everybody's after work, is tired. I know how that feels. I'm tired as well, but I still have enough motivation to go through some removable cases with you tonight and with Veronica together. So tonight we're talking about digital removable. By the way, the thought behind, I know we have some newbies here today, some newcomers for our series. The thought behind was basically to bring removable closer to everybody, just because I think there are some clinicians, they're trying to not do removable so much anymore because it's just too tricky, or it doesn't pay enough maybe, or whatever it is. It doesn't matter. But in reality, we're doing teeth, right? We're gifting smile to patients. And I think removable is a very, very important option what we have to do. And some cases start with a removable case and ending up with a really high-end implant full mouth reconstruction. So let's get right in. So removable full dentures and partial dentures, or digital removable denture, partial dentures. I promised the last two times we want to focus a little bit more on partials. We do have some more slides for partials. And I also promised everybody at the end of our series, we're going to do a bonus module just with partials. And I know Danielle's looking at me right now. She's across me. And she says, what? We didn't talk about this. Yes. Well, I promised it last time, and we're going to do that. So let's see. We are right in the middle, right? August 28th, digital removable. We do have still 3 meetings left, September 4, 11, and 18, about overdentures, telescopes, and attachment bar solutions, so something more complex, basically. And also, I want to make sure Veronica and me, we both have no financial interest in that webinar, in that lecture. That is just purely educational. And then a little bit about myself. My name is Alexander Wünsche. I'm the co-owner of Zahn Technique, together with Danielle, my business partner and life partner and wife. We're basically here in South Miami, Southwest Miami. We are a full service laboratory. We do, but we're specializing more of complex and more aesthetic cases. We do a lot of large full mouth reconstructions on implants, for example. We, I would say, like more a boutique laboratory. We're focusing basically on high end, right? That's like our specialty, and we really feel very comfortable in that. As you can tell, I have a German accent. I'm from Germany, so I came over to the United States in 2009. And since then, I'm in the Miami area. And since 2010, I'm with Zahn Technique. And since 2014, Danielle and me are the owners of Zahn Technique. Next to me is Veronica. I want to introduce very quick, and then she can take over. I'm extremely happy that she is with us now. We know each other since over 10 years now, and she is an absolute expert in removable. And she definitely helps Zahn Technique, or me here, a lot in the laboratory. We have a team of 11 people. And it's a big help to have her on board now as our removable department manager. She brings a lot of expertise with her, and then really I enjoy working with her. So I think you can take it from there, right?
Thank you. Yes. Hi, everybody. My name is Veronica, and I also have an accent very different from Alex's. I am from Prague, the Czech Republic, where I grew up and went to school for 4 years for dental technology. And when I moved to the United States, I actually was lucky to get a job at a maxillofacial prosthodontic practice. For 10 years, I was there. So most of my removable knowledge is basically from that office. So, and then I was living in Maine. Some of you may know me from having a small boutique lab in downtown Portland. And when my daughter grew up, I decided I needed a change of life. And I had this opportunity to join Alex and Danielle in Miami. And so here I am. And I love every minute of it.
That's awesome. And I did not pay you for that to say that. No, we really enjoy working together.
So our first slide basically will remind everybody of our first 2 modulars that we did 1 week ago and 2 weeks ago. So the importance of the impression, which is obviously a foundation for any successful restoration. Then we went through all the landmarks on the maxilla as well as the mandible. And we also were talking about bite blocks and establishing a correct BDL.
The second module last week, we actually take it a little bit more serious about aesthetics. We talked about the shape of the face, right? We talked about shape of teeth. We talked about occlusion, setups, try-ins, et cetera, and even all the way to the finish of a denture or upper lower denture. So that's like been more into really the weeds in terms of, okay, aesthetically, functionally, but we kept it pretty analog, right? And communicating with the laboratory in terms of videos and photos. So now, this time actually, yeah, go ahead, man. Take it from there, Veronica.
Yeah, so this all of the two modules that we previously did led us to talking about digital dentistry, because analog is really a base to any successful digital restoration today. So the digital dentistry represents a paradigm shift in oral healthcare, basically.
So yeah, and that's like, I think a lot of people waiting for that module, just because when we look into digital dentistry and removable, that was always like treated a little bit like, can we do really digital denture or dentures in the digital workflow? And for many, many years, it was like a purely no-go, right? And I would say since 5, 6, even 7 years, it gets more and more comfortable to actually really think about that and utilize the digital tools for that. And I would say, especially like over the last 2, 3, 4 years, intraoral scanning definitely made a huge step into the whole digital kind of era, digital workflows in dentures, in or removable dentistry. Then in combination with 3D printing and also milling, of course, but we already had, and especially the advancements we see now in CAD/CAM software. Two of them, like 3Shape and exocad, are the biggest one. There are many, many others out there, of course, smaller software companies, but everybody most likely knows exocad and 3Shape. That's very important to understand how all these digital equipment and these digital tools can work together to really have a very successful outcome. Especially when we look into intraoral scanners, which is literally equal, if an intraoral scan is equal to a digital impression, or actually is an impression, right? But what's the difference to the gooky silicone material, basically, right? So is it faster or cleaner, right? Or more predictable, more comfortable, more efficient treatment time, and especially it's replicable. I think when we look into these bullet points, and just here on that slide, it's important to take a couple of them out, and Veronica and me discussed. Definitely one of the 3 most important thing, it's cleaner, right? That's like, I think, a pretty important thing what we see here in the laboratory. If we get a PVS impression and we have to make a stone model, that's a lot of stuff going on, right? If we get a scan, we can just sit on a computer and start designing. That's definitely cleaner, efficient, no question, right? We can send a scan, right? I mean, you know that too. We can send a scan. We don't have to send a courier to pick something up. And for me, in my experience, all digital workflows, they are replicable. Right? It means I have something saved, a design or a scan, and I can replicate that specific design over and over and over for that specific patient. Especially in removable, I think it's a really big win. We'll talk about this in a little bit later, right? But important is the treatment planning in the team, right? That's like, I think, the key to really focus on. We need the whole treatment team to work very well together in digital. Otherwise, we're really ending up in a dead end. That's important to understand.
So let's talk about scanning. And let's talk about materials.
Materials, yeah.
Yeah. So we have 3D printed resins.
So on the resin side, I think that's very important to understand. I would even say they are the most advancements done over the last kind of few years in resins, just because we used to have resins. Resins were not very predictable. They were not very consistent in terms of curing, in terms of volume. There were a lot of shrinkage. But over the last years, there were a lot of advancements. The resins really got very, very well and very good, right? If you look into the resins, there are pros and cons, right? So what did we the pros maybe?
So the pros, definitely manufacturing time. It's way faster. There's less chemicals, so excess monomer is less. They're very consistent in the fit, which is also very important. They're very strong. They're very aesthetically pleasing to a certain extent, I would say, with printable, and they are very replicable.
Great. But when we have pros, we have also cons, right? And the cons are, it's kind of subjective a little bit because there are resins that are coming out that actually eliminating these cons, right? So cons usually always say the strength and brittle. Veronica just said pros, the strength of the 3D printed resins. Unfortunately, there are resins out there that are not as strong, right? They look good, but they're maybe not as strong. They're very brittle, so they can actually break. They're very monochromatic. So usually we don't have resins that show a gradients from a more chromatic to a more translucent area in the tooth, for example, right? So that's very difficult sometimes to really print something very aesthetic in terms of color and gradients. The manufacturing process is toxic, right? Non-cured resins are not healthy, right? So certain people should not deal with them, basically. Like if you have a pregnant assistant or pregnant lab tech, that person should not deal with non-cured resins, for example, right? Or even be close to them, right? We, for example, in our laboratory, we have actually a suction over the whole area where we do a non-cured resin working with, where we mix them and we shake them and all these things so that we don't really have the toxic fumes going into the laboratory, right? Mm-hmm. Then there's a lot of confusion in the final curing process. I think that's a very big kind of cons, just because we have to understand how to actually finally cure these specific resins. Every resin almost needs a different process to cure, just in time. So we have different time differences in curing process, but also some of them needs nitrogen to cure a gas, basically. Some of them needs glycerin to cure, or different curing chambers, right? So that's the difference. It's sometimes really confusing. Excessive equipment needed. I already mentioned we need different curing machines, different curing chambers. We already have here 2 or 3 different ones, and we most likely will have more over the next years, and we have more different resins, right? Then you have to wash it, all these things. And then I think the biggest cons is anybody has to, or somebody, let's say somebody has to maintain that equipment, right? That's the biggest deal. For me, it's important, my laboratory, I would love to have to clean like a surgical room, right? So if you imagine we have to clean over and over and over the area where you're printing. I sometimes come into offices, dental offices or laboratories where I do consulting, and we see the 3D printing area, and I don't even want to step into that just because everything is gooky and everything is like gluey and sticky, because the resin is really tough to get off sometimes, right? When it's not cured. So these are the pros and cons. I don't want to talk it bad. Don't get me wrong. It's getting better and better, but we have to be really clear here, right? To the cons, to the pros, you said aesthetically pleasing to a certain extent. So what to a certain extent, right? So when we look into especially dentures, most of these pink resins in the past, they were pretty translucent. And you could see the teeth through, right? So the denture teeth, they were then glued in or they were processed in, you could see the necks. That looked pretty bad, to be very clear. Nowadays, we have more, or have a higher opacity resins, what makes it just already a more better aesthetic. So yes, we are having better aesthetics in these resins, right? So now they're coming new resins, like this here, for example, we call them nano resins or hybrid resins. So they're really cool because they're really strong. They're very strong. They're higher in strength, right? And they contain ceramic particles in their mixture of resin. Some people will say, well, it's a printable ceramic. I personally don't like that, because for me, as long as the resin is in the mix, it's not a ceramic, right? It's maybe a composite, but not a ceramic. So in reality, they are stronger, they're higher in aesthetic because of the different ceramic particles. There are different values, the different kind of percentages, how you can say it, basically what makes that resin more aesthetic and less aesthetic, more strong and less strong. I like to use them, especially for teeth or even for denture teeth, because they're more wear stable, right? And more aesthetic. And then we either bond them into a millable base or into printable base, where we can write to the topic, right?
Yes, so now we can talk about milling and millable discs. So this is a millable PMMA. And remember that you can mix and match, basically. You can have a printed base with millable PMMA teeth. And yeah, so the strength of the millable PMMA is great. It's much stronger than the printable resin. And we just aesthetically now the pucks that they have are very aesthetically pleasing, much more than they used to be.
So how does it actually manufactured with this? You know that?
Mhm.
These pucks, it's cool. The industrial manufacture, right? They're actually like regular acrylic, basically, but they're really cooked and pressed in big machines. I saw a machine already. It's getting high pressure pressed acrylic. So they're super, super strong with that, right? And very dense. That's why they're so nice to mill, or actually also very tricky to mill. Our milling machines or burrs don't like them, but they have an extremely smooth surface, right? So we have a very, or actually almost no porosity in there, like what we used to have in processed acrylic. So we now have an acrylic, which actually connects to regular acrylic. So we even can now reline them nicely with the regular acrylic or repair them, but it's much denser, much nicer. So bacteria and plaques doesn't stick to it, right? And Veronica already mentioned what I like on that, we can now combine it, right? We can actually mill denture teeth like you see here as a bridge and process that into a pink base, into a pink acrylic base. Or we can have the mill teeth, which is nice because now we can have a multi-layered block and have them now in a nice gradients and a nice aesthetic, and process them or glue them, almost like bonding them into a printed base, right? So we have all these different kind of possibilities now. Why do we need that actually? Well, the sense of having a printed base sometimes is, I have a 30 or 35 millimeter blank, the thickness. So now my palette maybe is super deep. I have these extreme cases, and obviously Zahn Technique, we always have these extreme cases. I have this extreme case and where I maybe need a 40 millimeter blank. Right? I don't have that. So I can actually then say, all right, then I have to print that specific case, but I still can mill the teeth if I want to, right? So the pros, let's, what Veronica already mentioned a little bit, the manufacture time and labor. It's definitely much better than analog dentistry. So if we do now setting up teeth and go the whole process, basically, the excess monomer is less. The consistent fit is amazing, right? The strength, aesthetic, it's replicable like the printed ones. On the con side, we need excessive equipment. What I mean with that is we need a whole digital suite for that. We need the software, we need the mill, basically. The mill has to be a 5-axis mill, otherwise it doesn't make sense. And it should be water cooled as well. So we did a whole water coolant system in the mill, basically, right? The equipment has to be maintained very diligently. If you don't maintain your mill will break down. There's no question. So our mill, for example, every Monday, my whole milling suite has to look like brand new, right? I want to have everything like super clean and really well maintained. The material cost, a blank is more expensive than resin, right? So we have to definitely look into the truth here. Material costs are definitely much higher than if you would print a denture, right? And we have to stock different shades, right? So you have to run a higher stock basically here. The mill time is sometimes killing me when I think about we need to mill teeth and mill a base. That takes 5 to 6 hours per arch. So always take that in consideration as well. Right. And then we have these all-in-one solutions. It's pretty cool. That's a blank, which is pink, and teeth are bonded together and they have like waves inside. And so we can actually design a monolithic denture and have it milled out of one piece, which is really amazing. In reality, I love it. You did it already, right?
Yes, I did one time. Yeah.
And it worked out nice, right?
It worked out really nice.
Yeah,
really
so
nice.
that's pretty cool because in reality, that's the best out of all worlds, right? You have one piece, but you have teeth and you have pink. But there are limitations. There are cases you cannot nest that denture properly into that blank. You will have some bleeding of either tooth colored into the pink or vice versa. So that's not a disaster. You just have to then manually later on remove these areas and then actually pretty much patch it with acrylic, right? To make it still nice aesthetic, which is not a problem because again, it's PMMA. PMMA is acrylic. And then we have this year, I think you also tried this as well.
Yes, we have tried this. So we have combination of prefabricated teeth. They come in blocks, and basically you can then bond them or cement them into the denture base, or you can actually use acrylic even. So the bonding is better between the teeth and the acrylic. And I believe since I've been at Zahn Technique, we have received way more digital dental cases, and it's progressively getting more and more as we go.
Yeah.
So I think the digital future of removable dentistry is definitely big.
Cool on these prefabricated teeth cases. Actually, I want to mention that is now we're actually working with real denture teeth. And I today we had a meeting with the team and we talked about a little bit. What I like on a traditional denture tooth, it's almost the highest aesthetic tooth you can have, because you have a tooth literally built from the inside out, like a real human tooth, right? With the dentin, we have enamel, we have translucency, we have all these different layers on a tooth. That's how a high-end denture tooth is built, and that's how they do it here as well.
Yeah.
So we have the best out of tooth worlds. Actually, we can design a digital denture, we can print or mill that base, and we can pick and choose the teeth and just bond them in. It's really, really interesting, right? Is it like economic? No, it's definitely a higher price solution, but also more aesthetic. So now, if you look into digital dentures and if you look into materials, we just learned, right? And please, don't forget, if you have any questions, use the chat box to write it in. After the lecture, we're going to go over the questions. I'm happy to answer as much as I can, right? So intraoral scanning for full dentures, how does it actually work? And I also want to say thank you so much to Devon from Align. She kind of sent a couple slides to me to utilize for the scanning protocol for denture scanning, which really is very helpful. Amazing slides, by the way. Thank you, Devon. So what I appreciate on digital dentures and intraoral scanning in combination is we have less appointments.
Yes.
So the first appointment is scanning of the edentulous ridge and opposing, right? So let's say we just do the upper, right? And have lower teeth still. And I want to show you now, going through the scan protocol, what you really have to watch out for and how do you move your scanner to capture most of the landmarks we need, or all of the landmarks ideally we need. So first of all, we have to remove excess saliva. Then it's a four-handed dentistry, which means you need your assistant with that, right? We have to definitely expand the mouth. You have to retract that we have visibility to all areas. Then you have to stabilize any movable tissue as good as possible, and you start basically on an anatomical mark, right? I will show you in a second what that is. And then a scanning pace, right? The scanner will guide you through. You maybe have to go back and rescan certain things. So then we start always in the middle, right? In the middle of the ridge, here in the mandible.
So why do we do that?
So that's a good question, right? So we start in the middle. Why? Because we need to have a starting point. And I'll show you in a second why that is, right? So we have to turn the wand and dip to the lingual, capture lingual and labial frenum. So now you see why. We're going now to one side, basically, right? And we see the right side, step by step, what we have to make sure to capture, right? So we complete the scan on the lingual surface. We retracted the tongue so that the lingual is nice captured, right? We scan the retromolar pad, which is a very important landmark. Roll over the ridge into the buccal, capturing the distal buccal corner of the ridge. Scan up to the midline, turn the wand. And now you know why we start in the middle, because now we do the other side, right? So we have to get a starting point. The starting point is always great to have it centered somewhere, because it makes it easier to go to both sides. Now to position the wand in the middle of the ridge again, right? Scan the lingual of the ridge, retracting the tongue. The same procedure basically we did on the right side, we now do on the left side.
And I would say, please remember to capture as many landmarks as you possibly can with a scan, because we treat the digital impression as the same as analog. So the more information you give us, the better.
Great. And we're going to show in a slide later what are we doing next, basically, after we scanning the edentulous arch, and why we need these landmarks. So bear a couple slides. So maxilla, right? So now we said before, we're actually starting with the maxilla denture. So it's the same thing. Remove the excess saliva, start on papilla and rugae. Stay close to the tissue, stabilize the mucosa when scanning, and the scanning pace again, right? So watch out for that. So now we start in the palate, we start in the middle and an incisal papilla in the middle. Start and going like a little snake, right? Back and forth over the papilla, basically. Turn the wand on and scan the palate in a wave type movement. Snake, can also say wave. Scan slow and steady down and across the palate, capturing the vibrating line. Capture the distal of the hamular notch as you roll onto the ridge. So now the next step is basically you start on one side of the ridge and go to the other side, right? You scan, you capture the distal of the hamular notches. That's very important. We need them. Again, these are landmarks. Scan the ridge toward the opposite side. Move slow and steady to allow image to build. Avoid blanching the tissue. Keep disposable sleeves lens clean and free of debris. That's very important, right? That your lens has to be clean. Otherwise, you're getting kind of disturbance maybe on scanning. Why I read all this here is very important because this is a protocol we have to follow. And please, that webinar is later on YouTube. You can watch it over and over. You can even make screenshots of it. These are really cool step-by-step procedures what you actually should follow for a successful edentulous scan. It's very protocol sensitive, but it will work. That's the good thing, right? And then we capture the buccal and the vestibule, capture the distal buccal of hamular notches when rolling onto the buccal. Angle 1 to capture the vestibule up to the midline, and then be cautious not to blanch the tissue or move the tissues. That's important. We don't want to move the tissue with our scanner, right? Because we want to capture it where it belongs to. Repeat on the opposite side to complete the scan. Evaluate, scan, and fill in any missing areas of anatomy. Very important. I'm getting a lot of edentulous scans. They have all their holes all over the place. As soon as there's a hole, I can fill it. If that hole is closed somewhere, I cannot fill the hole digitally, so the denture will be short in this area, right? And you have to take actually then a wash impression and make a border molding with that.
So yeah, maxillary anatomy, the same as mandible, and capturing all the important landmarks like the buccal frenum, the labial frenum, the alveolar ridge, vibrating line especially. The hamular notches is very important when you are doing intraoral scanning.
So now that was the first appointment. So there's scans that come to the lab, right? And then we have the second appointment.
So yes, so the second appointment is basically providing us with the correct video and registering and providing us with a rich record. So in some instances, you will need to do soft tissue compression impression because we don't really know with a scanner how deep is the soft tissue and how it compresses. So this is also very important for us.
So after you use the bite block, the bite registration, and yes, that also can be an old denture. We will discuss this in a few slides, right? We're going to go step by step. In this case, we're assuming that patient doesn't have anything, just a bare ridge, edentulous ridge. So now that bite registration, right? After you reline it, what Veronica just explained for the soft tissue compression, now you can send it back to the lab. Or you can say, why should I do that? We're digital, I can just scan it and send the scan, right? So now, again, it's the same thing. You take out your bite registration after you take a bite, remove the excess saliva, trim away excess PVS material from the wash impression. Yeah, that's we saw in the module 2, actually. No, module 1, we went over the bite registration. We saw how Dr. Roy trimmed away excess PVS material to make sure everything fits nicely. So you do the same thing, right? So you see these modules building up on each other. So go back to the module 1 and just check out if you have questions to that, or just write an email. And then we hold the denture in the hand, as you see it here still, and start on the buccal surface of denture teeth to scan. One has to be flat and contacting the denture here or the bite block. You can literally contact the bite block, right? Get in touch with it, move slow and steady. And then you do the same thing as you would do in the mouth, right? You're scanning the occlusal surfaces, start in the occlusal surface, hold the denture steady, make sure you don't like really move a lot, you really hold it steady or even on the table and that everything is stable. Maintain contact with the teeth or with the bite rim here in this case while scanning, capture the contour of the posterior seal. That's very important, right? Because you just made a wash impression of that. So now we have the posterior seal nicely impressed, scan it. Then you go the palate, right? Do the same thing, position the wand on the occlusal surface. And then you turn it one on and you proceed in a wave-like movement, what we saw before again over the palate. And you stay in contact with the surface of that bite block, always touching it. And then scanning the buccal surface, right? Move from the occlusal to the buccal. You move over and you scan the buccal surface. The wand should be in a horizontal position to capture the buccal. then we're doing the border, right? You border mold it with your wash impression. We saw that also in module 1, actually, how border molding works and how important it is. So don't skip that step, right? There's no reason to skip something because we already have a very short kind of appointments and very kind of little appointments here, the number of appointments. So stay in contact with the denture again, touch the denture, move the wand in a wave type motion to capture the teeth, here the bite rim and the contour of the buccal flange, and then repeat on the other side. And then intaglio surface, you turn around the denture, again, remove the saliva, it's the same thing what we saw before. And we're going over the intaglio surface, start in the distal border near the posterior seal. And imagine now we have that soft tissue compression with that PVS material, right? You just compressed it. Now we have a really amazing impression of the soft tissue, and you scan basically intaglio surface. Yeah, scan the border mold from one side to the other, move the wand across the posterior seal. And then same thing with the wave, right? The intaglio surface, position the wand toward the anterior of the intaglio, and you go in waves basically to capture that palate intaglio surface and roll over to the border mold, what you border molded with your impression material to capture that.
So now we're already at appointment 3.
The cool thing is now that's all what you have to do, and then send us a scan or they'll scan to your lab, right? So we do the rest, and then all of a sudden appointment 3, right?
Exactly. So here we have a printed prototype try-in. And this is actually the patient with upper and lower prototypes for a try-in, where you really want to establish the proper occlusion. You want to also make sure that it's a comfortable fit for the patient. If it's not, then we're going to do a wash impression. And then also, again, the protocol, video, photos, midline markings, because we're not there to see this. So any information that you send us, like videos and photos, again, I can't reiterate that enough. It's very helpful.
What did Oscar say today? You're pipping it?
Yeah, exactly.
What is pipping?
So PIP paste. So PIP paste, that's important to check the fit on the intaglio of a denture or denture base. So
yeah,
to make any adjustments.
We talked this morning in a team, and then one of our team members said, well, you're pipping it, right? And it's like, what is pipping? And then, oh, PIP paste, right? Yeah. Remember in the module 1 and 2, Dr. Roy in his video showed how you use PIP paste to remove any excess contacts and so on, that everything sits nicely. It's very, very important. So by the way, let's go back very quick. Prototype trying, I think, is one of the most important steps in digital dentistry in general, right? Not just in dentures, also in all other workflows, just because in digital, we already be able to skip certain steps to do analog, but also can combine steps to make it shorter, basically. But the prototype helps us so much for informations, and what Veronica mentioned, especially photos and videos, are so important, right? So now we're going to show in a couple slides what kind of photo template or photo protocol we actually would like to see from you to be able to give you something really good back, right? And then last appointment is finished, right?
Yes, I was actually, Alex, if you want to go back to the previous slide for a second. So I also wanted to mention again from the previous 2 modules, we were talking about when you are doing a wash impression, it's really important that you have your patient biting down. And when you're taking the bite registration. So don't just take a bite registration and do the steps separately. You need to do them all at once, basically, so you don't lose where you're in space.
Awesome. Yeah, I forgot about that. Actually, it's great input. Yeah, and then we have to finish denture, right? In whatever material we decide to do together, that's going to be then a decision you have to make with your patient, right? So now there are other kind of workflows we really like, and I think we're really amazing, especially in digital workflow, is scan for a duplicate denture or scan with an existing denture, especially the denture duplicate. Since we're doing digital dentures, blew completely up, right? I mean, that was crazy. When I think about how many duplicate dentures did we do before digital, almost none. Right? I
know.
So it's like, we have to do duplicates. This is a lot of work, right? Now we do a lot of duplicates. Sometimes we even do a finished case And we then already do the duplicate as a spare, right? Which is really cool. I mean, that's like, I think, the biggest strength of duplicate dentures, right? So again, for something like this, we need photos as the template. We show you in a second. We're taking a wash impression with the existing denture and the bite. And then we're scanning with iOS denture with wash outside of the mouth. Yeah, you don't scan it inside of the mouth. You maybe capture the bite inside of the mouth, but you take the denture out with the wash and you scan with the protocol outside of the mouth. And actually, then is already the delivery of final denture. So theoretically, you can have a duplicate denture in 2 appointments, right? Taking the records, delivering the final, which is really amazing. Yeah. Even if you do improvements on this final, right? Or we do 3 appointments, we do maybe 1 quick try with the prototype. If it's really excessive improvements or changes, we definitely want to try that in. That's the photo template I was promising to you, right? So in reality, you see 6 pictures here. In reality, we need 2 main pictures. 2 main pictures are full face smile and full face retracted. Believe it or not, if I tell my clients, well, we need full face smile, full face retracted, what I'm getting always is full face smile and close up retracted. I can't work with that. So I always need the full face. Why is it so important? Landmarks. I can utilize all the landmarks in the face to superimpose both faces together in my system, and then can start designing the denture. That's so important, right? And then what you see here, we just go in a close-up, we zoom in, right? They crop out the face if we need a really close look to it. As a kind of bonus picture, the 12 o'clock shot where you see the left lower side is really good because it shows a little bit more the buccal, the facial corridor and the curve of the arch, which is nice to have. Not necessarily we have to have it if we have all other scans necessary. So then we're going to the external surface scanning. It's the same thing as we just went through with the bite plug, right? So we have to remember, we take the denture, we take a wash impression, and that's the same thing what we did module 1 and 2, right? So we border mold everything, we make everything perfect as possible. We remove the excess PVS material, remove excess saliva, and then we start the scanning process as we just saw it when we scanned the bite block. It's the same thing, right? So we start with the occlusion surface scan, we then do the palatal scan, the palate scan in the waves. We start with the buccal surface. It's the same protocol, right? We're scanning in waves the buccal, the border molding basically, and the teeth here, not the pipe plug. And then we turn it over and scanning entirely. Important is steady. Do not move the denture up and down when you scan it, right? You want to have it stabilized nicely. And we go through the process entirely surface. We go through the process of, again, the waves for the palate intaglio and the border molding. And then we scan the bite, right? So now, if you have a double arch denture, we can just take a bite and take out like a sandwich and scan that, right? And we have. If you have just one arch, we put it in the mouth, let the patient bite and scan the bite in the mouth. So we have basically a bite to the real opposing, right? So that's like the choices you can do. Same with the bite block, right? We take a bite basically, and we have to scan the bite. That allows you not sending us the actual records physically to the lab. We just can send us the scans.
Now we're going to talk a little bit about digital partial dentures and the materials associated with them. So we have some malleable materials, which is either acetal or PEEK, and then printable materials, which would be 3D printed resin. We use those to actually do a casting for metal partials. And then we have elastic resins as well.
And one I forgot to write down actually is we can now SLM partials. SLM stands for selective laser melting. That is actually a metal printing process. And there are a few companies, they now do that. By the way, these printers are like $500,000 to $1 million printers. It's insane. They're huge to print little partials. You have to have a lot of partials to actually make that ROI back. But they're fitting nice, they look good, they're really nice. I want to go more deeper into these millable materials versus printable materials. I want to explain a little bit more what my experiences with them over the last years. They may be different than you hear in the industry or so, and other industries or in literature. I just tell you what my experiences. So if I go into millable materials, mainly we differentiate between acetyl, that's like a very typical material we utilize for flexible partials mills, and PEEK, or let's say high performance polymers. It's actually more correct wording for that, right? So the difference acetyl is like similar to a really elastic, pressable material for flexibles. It can be milled, right? Which is nice, but the problem is acetyl takes on moisture, and over time it gets soft, right? So when you have a acetyl denture, partial denture, after 1 or 2 years, it will not fit the same anymore. It will definitely give a little bit more and will soften. The problem what I have with this, I'll show you how it looks basically. That's like an acetyl framework. The problem I have with that is they sink down at some point. So the rest seats or the rests in the rest seats and the clasping, and when they get soft, they can basically give some at some point, and we have a unilateral case or so, or a bilateral case, it goes down, right? So that's the only problem I have. So I always say like these partials in these polymers or in these flexible materials are more like long-term temporaries. I don't see that as a final definitive material, which is fine. We just have to educate our patients and prepare them, right? We have to tell patients, listen, I can make you the tooth-colored partial with a tooth-colored clasp, but it's not going to be forever, right? It's not going to last like 10 years plus. It's good for 2-3 years, and we have to then do a new one. We just remill the old one, or we have to scan if something changed in the mouth, and we're going to make a new one, which is not a big deal, right? PEEK on the other side, or high performance polymers, it's a little bit better. These materials are definitely more sturdy, but they have limitations because of sturdiness, right? Some extreme undercut cases are maybe not doable with them, but on the long run, also these materials get softer, right? So we have to also really see it realistic. And in all honesty, if I compare like a beige color or gray color like polymer in compared to metal, honestly, I think the metal is almost more aesthetic, because the metal does not like blink out like a light in your mouth, basically. These polymers are really, you can see them. That's the point, you know. So now if I look more, oops, that's about too fast. If I look more into metal, my preference definitely is metal, right? If it's analog or digitally manufactured, it doesn't matter. Metal is, from a partial perspective, definitely the longevity is better. I think it looks better. It's more high end. It's more high quality. So I would always go, if you go for a longer time, for longer span, I will go with the metal partial.
And it's also, sorry, I'm like, I wanted to say something before. I wanted to mention that the metal is also adjustable, where especially around the clasp areas, and you all know that at one point or another, you do have to make some adjustments to the clasps and the occlusal rests. So you cannot really do that here with the PEEK or the acetyl material.
Thank you for that. That's I completely forgot. This is a great input. And it just interrupt me when you want to say something. That's perfect. I love the conversation, right? That's why we're here to two people. Yeah, really, like that bonus of two people here, an expert in removables. So definitely you get the best out of both roles. So yeah, no, you're completely right. I want to talk a little bit about the fitting of these digital partials. Our experience actually is amazing, right? Yeah. So we have a little video. Dr. Roy took the sound out that we can talk. So he did his first metal partial on a printed model, on a digital metal partial on a printed model, and he was ecstatic, right? Yes. It fit perfect. He's showing right now the rest seats here. That's the printed model partial was made on, basically. And what he definitely loved is the rests were sitting, the clasp was sitting perfect, the bars were sitting perfect. So it was a really amazing result. I know sometimes there are some of your colleagues, they don't have these amazing results with that. And my observation is most of the time it comes back to scanning. it comes back to the intraoral scan, not necessarily for the material. There's another aspect, and we really have to then look into how is that partial manufactured? Is it manufactured of a printed model, or is it manufactured from a intraoral scan? These are two different things here, right? We have to definitely see that. If we do an upper partial over a pallet, right, with a big palatal strap, we have to imagine soft tissue compression, right? So there is maybe a change possible. So that's something maybe we want to do a wash impression in the pickup and then rescan that to actually fabricate the partial. But if it's a small strap or in the lower with the lingual bar, usually these fit in really, really nice if the scan protocol was really well done, right? So I always recommend if you scan for a partial, scan it, send the scan to the lab and talk to the lab, discuss it. Hey, can you take a quick peek on that scan? Is it possible to do digital partial? There are instances I would recommend my clients, you know what? Looking at this with these undercuts and with the size, et cetera, let's go analog. I'm going to print that model. I'm making a custom tray for good border molding and good impression. And I even draw you the rest seats and maybe you have to correct a little bit. And then you take a PVS or an in-program impression of that specific patient for a good partial. We still, a lot of times, going back to the lab, we pour a model and go digital from there. We scan the model, design a partial. Like Veronica mentioned, we can print a resin partial and cast it, or we SLM the partial. You don't even see that at the very end. You just care about a good fit and a good quality, right? So our workflows might change over time more and more, but that's the key, right? But your digital impression or physical impression is basically the key for that final outcome. So long story short, what I've realized the most of the time, if there's a partial that doesn't fit perfect, it comes down to the record taking. If it's analog or digital, that's my observation. So concluding, right? Conclusion of our webinar today about digital.
So when you're going digital, you have to keep in mind basically that the initial cost of the equipment is going to be a good sum. You also have to be properly trained and also remember to train your staff. There's still some limitations with digital dentistry today. And then also technology. How many times have you had a malfunctioning computer or a printer? Same thing can happen with your digital equipment. So not leaving things to the last minute, always making sure that you're servicing your equipment properly is very crucial. And the other issue here may be the precise soft tissue scanning, because you cannot get the same compression, obviously, with a scanner, compression of the tissue, like you can with a regular impression.
Right. So now, that was pretty negative.
That's my European side.
I was just kidding.
My Eastern European
side. So when we talk about webinar, I said, well, you said the cons, I said the pros, and then we turn it around, right? No, it's just kidding. So no, of course, it's the negative. It's just reality, right? So future developments are definitely there. They're getting better and better. And I'm the guy, I love future stuff. I imagine your patient comes into your office and there's all very traditional old school, and the patient sees another office, everything is high-tech and computerized and clean and scanning and so on. They're excited. That's what I realize more and more when I go in dental offices and help our clients. They're super excited to see that new stuff, right? What I see also a lot is like the comfort, right? It's so comfortable to get a scan done than actually that gooky impression, right? That's a really good thing. Workflows are amazing. What my absolute, I lecture this since over 10 years now, that specific thing. The workflow in digital dentistry, what I love the most is the team approach. Because we now can really work in a team like this. I don't care where you are. You don't care where I am. I can be in Miami, you can be in San Francisco. We can work together like this digital dentistry because we can, so you send me a scan, I can look at the scan immediately, evaluate, can give you feedback. We can FaceTime, we can do a Zoom meeting about that scan, and you can treat your patient on the spot right there with your technician, literally on your side. I think that's amazing. If digital dentures, a crown, or whatever it is, move digital, it makes the life so much easier, right? It's clean. And of course, the materials, I'm excited for digital removables
Yes.
in material side. What's going on? Because there's so much development still happening. It's very, very exciting to see that. So overall, I want to say thank you for spending it's almost an hour, right, with us today.